Now, this is something that I wanted to bring up, right? And I know it wasn't said that we were going to talk about this beforehand, but I think, and it'd be interesting to think what you think as well. Kevin Holland should move to welterweight
Okay, what's your argument for it?
because he's kind of in between weight classes. He actually eats and drinks to get to 185, right? He's probably around the 177, 178 mark, right? And that's where he comfortably sits. Now, he doesn't do a huge amount of strength and conditioning. Obviously, he's mentioned that he's going to increase his strength and conditioning amount, although he doesn't like it. But he's a funny character. He doesn't have a nutritionist. He doesn't eat the best food. He eats some a questionable diet, a very relaxed diet, to be honest. And I think if he brought a nutritionist in, and he said himself, if I bring a nutritionist in, I could make 170. I think he would be a dangerous 170. I think the amount of height he has would definitely play a huge factor. And I think he's not essentially a middleweight fighter. He doesn't cut to middleweight. When you compare a Paulo Costa and a Yoel Romero, they cut a serious amount of weight to make middleweight. I understand Holland doesn't have a huge amount of muscle mass where he can just water load and then cut really. He doesn't have a whole lot on his frame.
Yeah, that's correct. He's not a big middleweight. He's not a big middleweight at all.
But he doesn't really cut to middleweight. He actually said, "Look, expect me to be a little bit underweight for the middleweight fight with Brunson, and then for that weight to come down. That weight's coming down. He eats up and drinks a fair bit to make that weight. That's not the correct way to do it."
Well, I feel like he just doesn't want to cut in general because he feels he might be weaker from the cut. However, if I feel like
there's a different way, I know if there's a different way.
Yeah. What if he just got his nutrition on point, and he took his strength conditioning a little bit more seriously, then he wouldn't have to make so much effort at middleweight and could be a little bit more comfortable at middleweight.
There's an insight I have on Kevin Holland now, and it definitely showed in that Brunson fight. Kevin Holland's interesting. He doesn't really eat that well. He doesn't really enjoy strength and conditioning, but he loves training, right? But he takes a very relaxed approach, incredibly relaxed approach. And and even the talking shit in between rounds and during rounds, my insight into Kevin Holland is that he's an incredibly gifted striker, right? But the issue with his personality is he doesn't want to go 100%. Because if he goes 100% and he loses and he took it seriously, then he doesn't have the excuse to say, I didn't give it my all. And if I did these certain things, I could have beat him. I could have done this. I could have done that. I think he's personally self-sabotaging himself, actually. I think Kevin Holland needs to change a few things. He needs to take it a lot more seriously. I think for him to be relaxed and do all this thing is great for his performance, right? But him not eating right and not taking it seriously is actually self-sabotaging himself. He is putting in these performances and he's not really taking them that seriously. I know he's incredibly athletically gifted in that, but he's also holding himself back. He doesn't want to go 100% right, because if he loses and he gave it his all, that would hurt his psyche and his confidence a shit ton, because he knows I was outclassed. Me on my best night got beaten. What do I have to do? He doesn't want to be in that scenario. He wants to know that this guy couldn't beat me on my best night. I did this to myself. I didn't take this seriously. I was eating donuts and random stuff during fight camp. That's the issue with Kevin Holland. He hasn't taken it seriously. If he employs a nutritionist, 100%, I could see him as a title contender at welterweight. But he needs to take it seriously. And that was the same thing I was kind of mentioning about some of these middleweights are just they're kind of...
Well, the
they're kind of bloated welterweights.
Some of the disproportion between a lot of them is insane.
It's 170 to 185. There's 15 pounds in between. If you're stuck in between, it's a horrible time.
Well, 15 pounds. What's that in kilos?
About seven
There you go.
kilos.
Oh, that's massive. Not even that, but you got like the ones who are trying to kill themselves to get to middleweight by cutting down, and there's the ones who are trying to bump them up so high. Like Darren Till is one of those who tries to bump himself up to middleweight rather than cut it because he used to be a welterweight. And
He doesn't really have to now. His cut to welterweight was intense.
Yeah.
Now he probably walks around like a light heavyweight,
Yeah.
right? But he cuts to middleweight, and that's he's huge. How did he ever make welterweight?
Yeah, but then you got Paulo Costa who has to fucking kill himself and dehydrate so much to get to middleweight.
Easily I think it's 215
Yeah,
pounds or something like that.
He cut so much water weight and all that, and then we had the IV drip situation, and then we also had people who just walk around it. There's not many that walk around at middleweight naturally. Kevin Holland is one of the very few that kind of walks around.
He's kind of underweight.
Underweight, yeah.
It doesn't make sense to me, to be honest. No, I don't think it's really that good an idea to be. You're kind of undersized, and especially when you're typically a striker.
Yeah.
And when you're underneath, and we saw this with Izzy, he was underweight. You know, when you have a bigger, heavier person that outweighs you because now they've rehydrated, there's now a 20-pound difference, which means someone's 10 kilos heavier than you.
Yeah.
Maybe in the first 2 rounds that doesn't make a huge difference, right? Maybe you're really good and you're really technical on the ground and you're able to scramble, inch out and get up to your feet, right? 3rd, 4th, and 5th. That weight does make a difference, especially when they're on top of you and they're smothering you like Brunson did. I think it'll only get harder from then on. There's no difference in the amount of grapplers at welterweight and middleweight. There's no real difference, right? What I'm trying to say is Holland would have a huge size difference at welterweight if he employed a proper nutritionist, and I think welterweight, he's a proper welterweight. He's at middleweight, he's kind of not out of shape because he's got incredible cardio, but he's not eating the right stuff. He could make 170 and he could be a title contender. I think Kevin Holland needs to move to 170, and I think he needs to take the sport a little bit more seriously and take himself a little bit more seriously for sure.
I mean, he's got 4 wins on his win streak. He had a 4-win streak. He fought 4 times last year. You know, he's probably one of the most active fighters. He's still quite young as well. He's in his late 20s. He's still got plenty of time to go. It's his mouth that's really cost him, because even he was on Dana White's Contender Series and Dana didn't want to sign him because he kept talking during the fight. And Dana does not like that.
I think Kevin Holland does really well against people that are, proper middleweights, right? When he fought Jacare Souza, he did really well, right?
Yeah.
Caught him off guard as well. Jaqueen, how do you say it? Is it
Joaquin Phoenix.
Joaquin Phoenix. Joaquin Buckley.
Yeah.
He's kind of like an overweight middleweight, to be honest. And that's when he succeeded knocking him out. Now, the person he had an issue was, in one of his last wins, was Darren Stewart to a split decision. Darren Stewart is essentially, because we saw him fight against Eric Anders last week, right? Unfortunately, that didn't go his way. But they're essentially light heavyweights. They're massive middleweights, right? And that's when he had an issue. He beat him by split decision, but that's a close fight.
Yeah.
That is a close fight, right? I think Kevin Holland does really well against people that are, usually in between welterweight and middleweight, right? Soon as they're big and they've got a huge amount of size on them, that puts a lot of issues. And Brunson was, that showed. That showed a lot.